LoreWarrior Campaign, 4th Succession War, 4th Wave. Operation Rat. The objective of the 4th wave of Operation Rat was to seize 11 worlds that, while not necessarily of vital economic or social importance, would further expand House Davion's hold in the Confederation. AFFS marshals felt that every world taken in this wave would be yet another blow to Chancellor Liao's hopes of any counterattack and recovering what he'd lost. If completely successful, the 4th wave would let the AFFS focus on isolated Capellan worlds near Terra and the eventual linking of the Federated Suns and the Lyran Commonwealth. 13 mech regiments and more than 100 infantry and tank regiments participated in the 4th wave. Though they had been fighting for 4 months with only a few weeks of rest, all of the regiments were in reasonably good condition. From the beginning of Operation Rat, the Transportation and Resupply Command, led by Marshal Geosa Miller, had so skillfully planned and executed its responsibilities that regiments almost always had at least enough supplies to continue the fight. The little scavenging done by the AFFS was to salvage Capellan military equipment and to take advantage of obviously valuable captured resources, such as food and medicine. Physically and emotionally, the soldiers of the AFFS were a little worse off. 4 months of interstellar travel, fierce fighting, and weeks of boredom had blunted some of the troops' sharpness. Troops of entertainers and travelling entertainment centres helped to restore their alertness and eagerness, but military intelligence warned troops and officers of the 4th wave to expect stiff resistance. MEO agents were certain that first-line Capellan mech units were now awaiting on at least 6 of the worlds, and it surprised the entire AFFS, though perhaps not Prince Hansa, and a few close associates, when not a single Capellan first-line mech unit was encountered on any of the worlds. Davion troops encountered only Capellan militia regiments, many poorly trained and equipped. In fact, the only place where the Davion warriors faced any stiff resistance was on Menkalinan, and that came from battle mechs of the Free Worlds League. Menkalinan. The 2 regiments of the Screaming Eagles had few reasons to celebrate the coming of 3029. Though they had fought with skill and daring and played important roles in the conquest of 2 Capellan worlds, the Eagles had become the pariahs of the AFFS because of what happened along the banks of the Canton River on New Canton. As the regiments had waited on New Canton for their next assignment, the mercenary supply line dried up because officers within Transportation and Resupply Command decided to punish them. Colonel Hokala, commander of the Screaming Eagles, complained bitterly to Major Jennifer Vass, the Eagles' liaison officer. He said his soldiers shouldn't have to suffer because of one officer, who couldn't control their own emotions. Major Vass passed on the colonel's complaints along with her own demands that the Eagles' supply situation be corrected, but nothing happened. As each day went without supply, the Eagles grew more disgruntled. Talk of appealing to Comstar for mediation or fleeing the AFFS became commonplace. When the 1st Regiment received the order in mid-December to assault Menkalinan, talk became action, or rather inaction. Soldiers of the 1st Regiment refused to fight for a realm that didn't honour their contract. Through intense negotiation, Major Vass got Colonel Hokala and the warriors of the 1st Regiment to agree to fight if they received at least some of their overdue supply. Major Vass then freed the supplies meant for the Eagles by arm-twisting and cashing in every favour due in her TNR command. Supplies began arriving at the Eagles' base in time for them to repair their equipment and board dropships bound for Menkalinan. Many Eagles warriors, particularly in the 1st Regiment, remained extremely upset. There was still talk of defecting. Menkalinan was claimed by both the Capellan Confederation and the Free Worlds League. Because the planet had few marketable resources, except for wood, from the world's many forests, both sides were content to split the world, with the Confederation controlling 3 of the planet's 5 major continents. The Menkalinan militia, consisting of 20 tank and infantry regiments and a lance of aging mechs and fighters, represented the Confederation. They faced an equal number of League regiments. There had been sporadic fighting between the 2 for years, and the standoff appeared likely to continue for years more to come. Unknown to the Capellan Confederation and the Federated Suns, a battalion from the 1st Guards, the premier mech unit on the Free Worlds League, had secretly landed on the planet in November. They'd hoped to overwhelm the Capellan militia and seize Menkalinan from Chancellor Liao while this concentration was on the Davion invasion. The battalion of heavy mechs, under Force Commander Kisha Bavara, had just crossed the Straits of Denar and was advancing on Karasasha, the capital, when the Screaming Eagles dropped 30 kilometers to their south and east. Commander Bavara cursed the new complication, halted the battalion, and reported the situation to his superiors on Berenson. Colonel Hokala was equally surprised to find the elite Marak mechs on the planet. The colonel warily ordered his forces forward toward Karasasha. The columns of Federated troops slowed to a crawl when they reached the narrow Rika Valley, where the Marak mechs stood watching. For 3 extremely tense hours, the two sides watched each other at close range until the last Eagle mech walked past the Marak position. Nothing was done, nor said between the two. The Screaming Eagles went on to Karasasha, where they met the Capellan militia just outside a thick evergreen forest, with the frustrated Eagles showing the militia no mercy. The mechs and fighters of the unit easily broke the defensive lines of tanks and hovercraft, forcing the Capellans to retreat. During this rout, Force Commander Bavara received her orders. Her superiors told her in no uncertain terms that she was to aid the brave Capellan defenders trying to push off the Davion scourge. Incredulous that she was to help the forces she had now been sent to destroy, she nevertheless complied. As the Screaming Eagles were about to enter downtown Karasasha, the security company guarding the regiment's communications suddenly reported that Marak stalkers were pushing through the forest at the Eagles' rear. Cursing his luck, Colonel Hokala ordered 2 of his battalions out of the city to meet this new threat. The mechs of the 1st and 2nd battalions couldn't reach the rear area in time to stop the Marak forces from overrunning the Eagles' supplies and communications facilities, and despite the efforts of the regiment's security company and that of a tank regiment from Galax, the heavy Marak mechs easily spread destruction through the rear area of the Eagles. The Capellan forces, many of whom had been hiding in the forest's edge until the fighting was over, took heart at the Marak support and attacked the Screaming Eagles, and not only was Colonel Hokala now fighting Marak mechs, but his docile Capellan opponents had suddenly turned into demons. Colonel Hokala's order to retreat north was the only way to keep them from being surrounded, but the decision was very unpopular with many of his troops. Leaving Karasasha greatly simplified the Eagles' situation. No longer pinned between 2 forces, they regrouped. His counterattack, which came at sundown that same day, took advantage of his numerical superiority and the disunity between the Liao and Marak forces. The 1st Battalion of the Eagles attacked the left side of the enemy line, where most of the Marak mechs were located, and the 3rd Battalion drove into the Capellan tanks and infantry on the right. At the same time, the 2nd Battalion, composed of light mechs, attempted to flank the Marak mechs by taking a minor road that wound behind them. Eagle fighters made repeated strikes against enemy positions, and against the Capellan infantry and vehicles their efforts were generally successful, but the fighter pilots were often in danger of being knocked out of the sky by the accurate Marak mechs. The diversion caused by the Eagles fighters allowed the 2nd Battalion, led by Major Saunders, to sneak to the rear of the Marak forces, and though the Marak mechs did greatly outweigh those of the 2nd Battalion, the Eagles still scored many hits and caused confusion. In addition, the Screaming Eagles repaid the Marak troops by disabling their communications and burning their supplies. With their supplies now in flames and the enemy threatening to surround them, the Marak troops retreated. They did so without telling the Capellans, and the abrupt departure of the Marak mechs left the Capellan forces without any heavy support, and they quickly began surrendering in the face of overwhelming odds. The battalion from the 1st Guards then joined the Marak garrison force and left Menkalinan to the Federated Suns. The battle between the Marak Guards and the Screaming Eagles was the first time that forces from the Free Worlds League and the Federated Suns had fought one another in centuries. Higher-level officers on both sides expected that it would soon become commonplace. Tall trees. Tall trees was perhaps the most important objective world in the 4th Wave. For many years, the Federated Suns had heard rumours of a secret Capellan biochemical research facility amid the planet's many forests. Stories of genetically altered crops that grew to miraculous heights, and about mega whale trout that weigh 300 kilograms, made the world a prime target for both the strategists and the scientists. These wonderful stories were offset by tales of mysterious plagues among the people and dreadful monsters roaming the countryside. The AWFS prepared for the worst. Accompanying the 4th Deneb Light RCT was the new Avalon Hazardous Materials Emergency Team. Hazmets are trained to deal with everything from chemical spills at factories to biological weapons on the battlefield. Though every world and every RCT has its own hazmat, the new Avalon team was considered the best because of its scientists, engineers, and soldiers from the NAIS. Intelligence reports told Marshal Fredericks, commander of the 4th Deneb, that there would be little resistance on tall trees. 30 regiments, most of them infantry, were scattered about the planet's continents, with the strongest on the continent of Burgundy. The report also suggested that the island of New Tierra del Fuego, just south of Burgundy, was the likeliest location of this Capellan research facility. The 4th Deneb dropped on Burgundy. 3 militia regiments challenged the light cavalry, but with little result. Unable to stop the superior enemy, the militia adopted the hit-and-run style of fighting in an attempt to slow the enemy advance. Davion forces would push south, seizing the planet's 2 largest cities, Fashura and Helena. The planet's large population, near 1 billion, proved to be a major obstacle for the Deneb forces. Partisan activities such as the destruction of bridges, communications, and even medical facilities forced them to rely almost totally on their own supply. As they advanced, the Davion forces searched for the secret Capellan research facility. Prisoner interrogation yielded only vague warnings of the consequences of tampering with the center. 10 garrison regiments made a final stand at Basura Crossing, the city nearest this island of Tierra del Fuego. They attempted to use the mountains and the streams to outmaneuver the Davion troops, their efforts stymied as Davion fighters harassed their movements and kept track of their positions, and after 2 weeks and a climactic battle outside the city, resistance collapsed. As the first Davion forces were crossing the narrow straits of New Tierra del Fuego, they saw a series of explosions within the island's forest. The leader of the Davion troops, Major Richards and his infantry, proceeded to the island and quickly came upon the smoking rubble of the facility and the bodies of 3 members of Death Commandos, Chancellor Liao's assassins who had blown it up. The first deaths among Richards' battalion came within hours of these explosions. Soldiers reported feeling nauseous and then fell into a coma. Death usually would follow the first symptoms within 10 minutes. In an hour, most of the battalion were dead. Their desperate pleas finally reached the hazmat team, and the leader of the team, Professor Helen Sawyers, bioengineer from NAIS, found Marshal Fredericks and informed him what was happening on New Tierra del Fuego. She asked him to place her team in charge of the situation, and he agreed. Among Professor Sawyer's first actions was to order troops on the Burgundy coast to shoot anyone attempting to leave the island, and then had special sniffer planes fly over looking for airborne contagion. Luckily, they detected nothing, meaning that the disease was spread by contact. Part of the hazmat team, in thick biocladding, parachuted on, and the rest of the team set up their labs. They remain there still, the scientists yet to isolate the disease, and any hopes that it was a short-lived bacteria or virus were shattered when a boatload of priests and nuns left Basra Crossing to aid the few survivors a month after the first deaths. They quickly contracted the disease, and most of them died immediately. Every effort is being taken to prevent the disease, now dubbed Richard's Regret, from spreading to the mainland. The only good news for Davion forces on tall trees was that they never encountered any monsters. Other actions. On the planet Shipka, the Gamma and Delta regiments of the 12 vegan rangers easily swept down on Shipka Commune, the planet's capital, from the north and west, and in a stroke of luck, the rangers captured a cache of jump ship parts. The 7th Crucis Lancers RCT attacked Fuchao. After a period of initial caution because of expected heavy Capellan resistance, the Davion troops quickly pushed through the militia lines. They easily captured Red Swan and Vashura, the industrial and political centres of the planet. The AWFS sent the 5th and 6th Crucis Lancer RCTs to Footfall, with the warning that at least 1 and possibly 2 of the Capellan's elite house regiments would be defending the planet. After dropping there on the northern continent, the Lancer commanders at first refused to believe the reports from their scouts and surveillance satellites that there were no Capellan mechs on the planet. Once convinced, the commanders ordered their troops to accelerate the pace, easily brushing aside the militia on their way to Gantz, the capital and manufacturing centre of Footfall. The 33rd Avalon Hussars easily conquered Woodstock, a temperate world devoted to raising crops and food animals. In going through documents at Recital City, the planet's capital, the Hussars discovered records from an ancient Star League agricultural research station that the Capellans had only recently found, the documents reportedly advancing the science of pest control. The effort to take Barat proved costly for the 1st Crucis Lancers, not because of anything the Capellans did, but because of a mechanical fault. The War Wagon, a Union-class dropship, suffered complete drive shutdown 2/3 of the way to the system. Other ships made room for the war wagons, mechs, and warriors, while its crew tried everything to repair the engines. The war wagon with its crew aboard crashed into the atmosphere of Barat and split into 3 pieces, which burned bright until they splashed into the planet's southern ocean. The capture of Barat, though easy for the Lancers, was tempered by the loss of the war wagon and its valiant crew. The desert world of Hamal was the responsibility of the first New Iverson chasseurs. They dropped south of Khalifa Hamal, the planet's only major city, and though the expert desert fighters of the Hamal militia harassed the chasseurs and their accompanying infantry and tank regiments, the power and swiftness of the mechs overwhelmed the defenders. High Spire had been the base of the world of 1st Kearney Highlanders, a formidable mech regiment of the Northwind. Secret negotiations between the clan elders and the Federated Suns effected their switch and departure from the Confederation to the Federated Suns. They left behind a collection of militia regiments that easily fell to the Capellan March Militia RCT. Because important Capellan military bureaucratic and logistical officers were on Azza, the planet had a militia that was twice as large and much better trained than those on other worlds. The 3rd Brigade of Guards landed east of Casella, the capital and major city of the planet, and were quickly attacked by militia units that hoped to hurt the guards in the confusion. The militia units caused some damage to the Davion troops, but were no match for the overwhelming firepower of the guards' mechs. Second Try, a small, cold world, had only a few militia regiments to oppose the 20th Avalon Hussars. The Hussars easily defeated the militia troops when they could find them, and the trouble was tracking them down in an almost constant blizzard of snow and ice. What could have been a simple task became a 2-month nightmare of freezing equipment and phantom enemies for the Hussars.